Everyone, and welcome to the June 2025 Ordinary Council meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio and video of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that any recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, welcome. Item 1 is the declaration of opening and announcements of visitors, and I declare this meeting open at 6 p.m. Item 2 is a disclaimer. The City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the presiding member. That's me. And councillors, at this stage of the agenda, I'm obliged to present this month's mayoral report. And for those members of the gallery who might not be aware, Council passed a motion at the October 2024 Ordinary Council meeting. That motion resolved that at each Ordinary Council meeting, I will present a report of the mayoral engagements and meetings attended by me in my capacity as Mayor since the last council meeting. The reasons in support of the motion stated that this practice is considered essential for maintaining transparency, fairness and accountability, allowing both councillors and the community to be fully informed of the Mayor's activities and enabling them to participate more effectively in council deliberations. So, this is the first part of the report. The first part of the report says that I'm required to present a summary of the events attended and persons met with by the Mayor in his capacity as Mayor since the last council meeting. And councillors, the last council meeting was held on Tuesday the 27th of May 2025. So in accordance with council's resolution, I'll begin from Wednesday the 28th of May 2025. Well, actually I'm starting on the 30th of May because that's when my next meeting was. So on the Friday the 30th of May, I met with the President of the Salter Point Community Group, Ms Sue Gilliott, to discuss the likely impact of the proposed significant views policy on the Salter Point precinct. On Tuesday the 3rd of June, I met with Acting CEO Gary Adams as part of our ongoing weekly meetings. As you all know, I meet with the CEO, or in this case the acting CEO, at least once a week to discuss the local government's affairs and the performance of its functions in line with Section 2.8 of the Local Government Act. And in an effort to try and reduce the length of this report, I'll note that I also met with Mr Adams on the 10th of June, the 17th of June and today for the same purpose. Same day, the 3rd of June, I also met with Mr Adams and the City's communication team. And again, as you all know, I meet with the City CEO and the City's communication team once per week to discuss current and upcoming communications by the City, potential third-party media relevant to the City, and my duties as spokesperson for the City. And once again, in an effort to try and reduce the length of this report, I'll note that I also met with the City's communications team on 9 June, 16 June and 23 June for the same purpose. Later that day, we're still on Tuesday the 3rd of June, I attended an acting CEO briefing, followed by the third budget workshop held at the City of South Perth, and which is noted at page 6 of the agenda. On Saturday the 7th of June, I attended a parish house blessing at St Columba's Catholic Church, and on Monday the 9th of June, I represented the City and greeted representatives of the Peace Run Torch Relay at the Scented Gardens on Sir James Mitchell Park. Later that day, I attended the City of South Perth's citizenship ceremony and helped congratulate 64 new Australian citizens on their brand new Australian citizenship. And thank you to everyone who attended that citizenship ceremony. On Tuesday, the 10th of June, I served as the presiding member at the June Audit, Risk and Governance Committee meeting. And on Wednesday, the 11th of June, I represented the city at a meeting of the Perth Inner City Group. As many of you know, the Perth Inner City Group is a voluntary alliance of the 5 inner city local governments in Perth, being the cities of Perth, South Perth, Subiaco, Vincent and the town of Victoria Park. Our objective is to collaborate across our borders to make the Perth Inner City the most appealing destination for our residents, visitors, businesses and investors. We exist to cooperate, collaborate and visualise the Perth Inner City. Each local government is represented by its mayor and its CEO. And on this particular meeting, we received a briefing from the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development about polyphagous shot-hole borer and discussed a range of topics, including e-scooters and 40km/h speed zones. Later that same day, we're still on 11 June, I attended and participated in a CEO Selection Committee briefing, as well as the Advocacy Strategy briefing and the Long-Term Financial Plan briefing mentioned at page 7 of the agenda. On Thursday, the 12th of June, I met with our local State Member of Parliament, Mr Jeff Baker, MLA, at Dome in Karrawara. And again, as you all already know, Mr Baker and I meet approximately once per month to discuss issues of importance to our local community and to consider what options are available at both the state government level and the local government level to make this district a better place for people to live, work and play. I then met with the CEO, Meg, and the Marketing and Events Manager, Laura, of Thrive WA, formerly known as Edmund Rice Camp for Kids, to catch up and hear about the amazing work that they've been doing to provide life-changing respite programs for at-risk and disadvantaged WA children and their families. Thrive have their base of operations right here in the city of South Perth, and they are a wonderful part of our community. On Tuesday, the 17th of June, I served as presiding member at the June Council Agenda Briefing, and on Thursday, the 19th of June, I met with the President of the South Perth Senior Citizens Centre, Ross O'Neill, to catch up and hear how the Senior Citizens Centre has been going. On Monday, the 23rd of June, I attended and participated in a CEO Selection Committee briefing. And today, 24th of June, I attended a top-out ceremony at the new Cygnus Parade development in the Cygnus Cove estate in Waterford. And that brings us up to tonight's meeting. The second part of Council's resolution requires me to present an overview of the key issues, initiatives and matters that I've been addressing in my capacity as Mayor since this last Council meeting. And once again, you're all already aware of this, but the main issues I've been working on since the last Council meeting are how elected members can work better with each other and with the City Administration to deliver on our community's priorities, and ensuring that the process for recruiting and appointing the city's new CEO is managed properly. And with that, we are up to date. That brings us to item 4, which is attendance. Item 4.1 is apologies. I haven't received any apologies for this evening, but I have received word that Councillor Andre Brenda-Abrandis is running a little bit late. I think he's stuck in traffic. He'll be with us shortly. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence. That's nil for this evening. Item 4.3 is parental leave, and Councillor Nick Coveney has parental leave for the period of 4 June 2025 to 4 December 2025 inclusive, but I see he's here with us today in any case. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Bear with me because there's a few that I'll have to get through here. Okay. Councillor Jennifer Navard has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.1 as I live within sight and sound of the proposed location for this event. I share this interest with many hundreds of residents who also live in the vicinity of the proposed venue site, Flagpole area, on Sir James Mitchell Park. Mayor Greg Milner, that's me. I've declared a financial and proximity interest in item 10.3.1 as some of the proposed heritage listings either include or are adjacent to or are across the road from properties that are owned or indirectly owned by persons who contributed to my re-election campaign in 2023. Councillor Andre Brendera-Brandis has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as I know of someone who is not a closely associated person to me and their property is on the draft local heritage survey for adoption. I've had a conversation with Ms Logue last week, an owner of 2 Parker Street, South Perth, with a proposed category 2 in the draft local heritage survey for adoption. The impartiality interests will not impair my decision making, which will be based on merit. Councillor Jennifer Navard has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as I had an extended conversation with concerned residents regarding their property, which is recommended for inclusion on the heritage survey, which is being considered for adoption at council this month. The conversation will not directly influence my decision in council. Councillor Hayley Prendeville has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as some of the homeowners on the survey are known to me through the community. Councillor Glenn Cridland has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as I know the owners of the property in Glyde Street that has been included in the local heritage survey as their children went and one still goes to school with my children. Mayor Greg Milner, that's me again, I've declared an impartiality interest in item 10.4.1 as this item potentially affects a number of community organisations that I currently serve as patron, have previously served on the board of, am a member of, am an honorary member of, and or have otherwise developed relationships with during my time on council. Councillors, does anyone else have Councillor Waugh?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Also item 10.3.1, an impartiality interest. I have been contacted by and I have met with and spoken to several residents affected by this item. None of them are known to me personally, so they will not impact my decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillors, any further declarations to be made this evening? That's a no. Okay. That brings us to item 6, which is public question time. Item 6.1 is responses to previous public questions taken on notice. That's nil for this evening. Item 6.2 is public question time itself. So I now open public question time at 12 minutes past 6 p.m. We've received 5 written submissions prior to tonight's meeting, and I'd like to begin by inviting Mr. Phil Knight of Como. If you'd like to come up to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening. First question is, when and why did the City initiate the draft changes to LPP 2.4 to be discussed at agenda item 10.3.2? And I guess the follow-up to that was there any form of public consultation involved in the development of these changes?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The City reviews its local planning policies on an ongoing basis to ensure it has a planning framework that is contemporary, consistent with state planning frameworks and reflects the aspirations of the community on planning-related matters. Local Planning Policy 2.4 is being reviewed along with other LPPs appearing on the agenda tonight. The City first drafts the proposed amendments to the policies, then undertakes public consultation in accordance with the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015, and where appropriate, feedback and submissions will be incorporated into the draft policies prior to them being considered for final adoption by Council.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Your second question?
Thank you. Second question, in regard to the addition of the specific draft change recommended to the wording of 5.1.1 of the current LPP to have a childcare premises located, quote, B, on corner sites to maximise accessibility and reduce impact on adjoining sites, end quote. Did this come about as a result of any form of feedback from the community?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you. A number of submissions were received on a recent development application for a mid-block childcare premises in Como. Whilst this application was refused, the City noted the potential impact mid-block centres could have on surrounding residential properties, and as such, has proposed to include preference for corner sites in LPP 2.4, which, if adopted, will be used for the assessment of future applications for childcare premises.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. And your third question, Mr Knight?
Is it the City's intention to review when finalised the provisions of the draft position statement on childcare premises dated April 2025, currently being developed by the Department of Planning and Local Heritage, and adopt all or some of these provisions into LPP 2.4?
Thank you. Ms Shaw?
Thanks. The City has compared the draft policy with the draft position statement from the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, and which is broadly consistent with the City's existing policy. Should further changes be made following finalisation of the position statement, the City will review and recommend changes when the policy is next reviewed. It is noted that the key change in the position statement relates to land use permissibility of childcare premises in residential areas, which is inconsistent with the City's current local planning scheme number 7. So if finalised, the City will recommend the Council initiate a scheme amendment to modify the land use permissibility in line with the State's position.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Mr Knight, for your questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Mr Peter Scott of Como, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you and good evening. In 2023 or thereabouts, the City embarked on an endeavour to create an entertainment facility at the Collier Park Golf Course based on the premise that it provided a commercial opportunity to return a profit and contribute to council revenue. A capital cost estimate of $18 million was established and a tender process was carried out to ultimately appoint Club Links as the operator, which included a capital contribution from them of $8.5 million. Subsequently, it was decided the council would provide all the capital required, presumably with the operator contributing over time. It is noted that in a recent edition of the My South Perth publication, that the capital cost has now risen to $19.8 million. So the costs have increased by 10% even before the tender process for design and construction has started. My first question, given that this development is a public commercial venture that has been rated as high risk by the council, what is the capital cost that would render it unviable, or does the council believe the project should proceed regardless of cost?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
Thanks for your questions, Mr Scott. Just to correct what you said in your preamble, the initial project was estimated at 18 million capital costs, of which Club Links was to contribute 8 million and the City 10 million. During the initial planning phase, the City identified 2 significant trees for preservation, and Water Corp provided input as to building around their easement. These 2 things resulted in design changes and contributed a significant amount to the increased costs. The current capital costings of 19.8 million include estimated cost escalations to the scheduled tender date, as well as design contingencies of 2% and construction contingencies of 5%. As stated in the previous council report, the City will now be contributing 11.3 million and Club Links have increased their contribution to 8.5 million. This was subjected to a revised financial analysis that showed minimal change to the positive financial outcomes over the 21 years of the agreement. Once the tender responses have been received and the actual costs are known, Council will be asked to consider entering into the construction contract. If the costs come back too high, Council can determine not to proceed.
Good. Thank you, Mr Adams. And your second question, Mr Scott?
Should the project proceed and incurs cost overruns from the original contract estimate, Is there an agreement in place where the appointed operator has agreed to contribute to that overrun?
Thank you. Mr Adams?
So other than for costs due to latent conditions, the agreements provide for contribution to cost overruns to be determined by mutual agreement. If agreement cannot be reached, the city has the absolute discretion as to whether the works proceed or not. The agreement also provides that any cost savings will be shared on a proportionate basis.
Thank you, Mr Adams. And your final question, Mr Scott?
Third question. Assuming the development does proceed, will the council administration provide the councillors with regular updates of actual profit versus the business case estimated profit to enable them to determine the commercial success or otherwise of this venture?
Thank you. Mr Adams?
Yes, this project is part of the city's revenue diversification strategy to reduce the burden on ratepayers, and as such will form a significant revenue stream for the city moving forward. So it will be subject to regular monitoring by city staff and reporting to council as part of the monthly financial reporting regime.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Mr Scott, for your questions. I'd now like to invite Ms Cecilia Brooke of South Perth. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your question.
Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors. I speak on behalf of the City of South Perth Residents Association. My preamble. While the officer recommendation, this is about e-scooters, while the officer recommendation goes some way to addressing the dangers posed by e-scooters by way of the outcome of a parliamentary inquiry, overwhelming evidence is presently available about dangers to all e-scooter riders and pedestrians on walking and shared paths that are used by e-scooter riders in WA as well as throughout the rest of Australia, and from other countries that information is available online. As we all know, this subject has received widespread coverage both on the radio and the TV over the past several weeks. My question is, given the weight of this documented evidence, shouldn't the council rather not proceed with any plans for an e-scooter share system trial to operate within the City of South Perth?
Thank you for the question. Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The use of e-ridables, e-scooters, generally are subject to the provisions of the Road Traffic Code 2000 and enforcement is carried out by WA Police. The City of Perth is currently undertaking a review of its e-scooter arrangements and the parliamentary inquiry is due to report its findings in September. Therefore, it would seem prudent for Council not to make any further decisions on e-scooters until after the results of these reviews are known. The recommendation tonight, if adopted, will mean that no further work is undertaken by City staff to progress the City's e-scooter trial until further information is available for Council to determine whether it wants to proceed or not.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo, and thank you, Ms Brooke, for your question. I'd now like to invite Dr Mark Brogan of Kensington, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and City of South Perth staff. My questions this evening concern outcomes from the local heritage survey that Council will be voting upon tonight with an adoption motion. As councillors will be aware, I've actually addressed the issue of the heritage of South Perth and providing it with greater protection in a number of deputations that I've made beginning in 2024, when the survey list was the subject of public consultation. Generally speaking, I've concluded the heritage of South Perth requires protection, and I'm in favour of the CEO's recommendation tonight, subject to the formal adoption of the classificatory changes recommended by the independent consultant. Sadly, having attended the briefing last week, one could be forgiven for thinking that the rapidly shrinking heritage of South Perth has few friends on council. Most notably, one member of council asked the head of planning whether it was legitimate to have a heritage list with nothing on it.
Dr Brogan, I hate to interrupt, but public question time is very much for questions. Could you proceed with question one, please?
Yes. My first question is in relation to Place 80, which is the residences in Hovea Terrace, Kensington. And I note that some residents have objected to the proposed classification of Hovea Terrace in the survey list. Noting this, I asked the City of South Perth and the head of planning Is it not also an available option for the city to treat the Hovia Terrace area as an urban character area within the meaning of State Planning Policy 3.5 to provide the basis of a light touch planning approach that protects streetscape and alleviates owner anxiety about heritage listing?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to be clear, for the benefit of the wider community, because you've mentioned list a few times, the item before council tonight, as you originally identified, is the local heritage survey, not the heritage list. So a local heritage survey identifies and records places that are or could be of cultural heritage significance, and it does not have any statutory weight afforded to it. And so this is quite different to the heritage list that council would need to consider separately, which is the item that actually provides the legal weight to protect the properties. So moving on to the part that was contained within your question. So State Planning Policy 3.5 was originally gazetted in May 2007. The document refers to both heritage areas and character areas, the former of which are now created under the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015. So for land within a heritage area, development approval is required prior to any use of land, works or any demolition activity occurring. It provides statutory controls over the land, and the city would typically recommend the creation of a heritage area where there are numerous properties with heritage significance within close proximity to one another. The ability for a character area to be created is not contained within the regulations, and as such, for a character area to exist within the statutory planning framework, it would need to be created via a local planning policy. So it's open for council to request that the CEO prepare a local planning policy for a character area. However, the ability to apply the provisions of the policy itself would only occur in the circumstances where a development application is otherwise already required. So some examples of where that may be required is where a place is already on the heritage list within a designated heritage area, or is a type of development that would otherwise require development approval. So creation of character areas therefore only offer statutory protection of places in those circumstances. So a heritage area has the statutory weight, a character area does not, unless a development application is already also required.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Your second question, Dr Brogan?
My second question, Mayor, concerns private property rights, which has arisen as a subject in deputations from last week's agenda briefing. And I want to explore the area of the articulation of private property rights and heritage. In section 103B of the Heritage Act, there is an exercise of council discretion in relation to listing. Council can refuse listings for, as the Chief of Planning pointed out last week, for a variety of reasons not consistent with the Heritage Act. And I note that in relation to some of the listings, that has actually happened. People have expressed an objection largely based on their property rights. Noting that the heritage lists of the City of Vincent, City of Bayswater, City of Fremantle, Town of Victoria Park, City of Stirling and City of Subiaco all contain multiple and numerous instances of private residences registered in the protected categories of 1 and 2. Can the City of South Perth realistically justify repudiation of the good practice principle that inclusion of a privately owned residence where a strong recommendation for inclusion has been made by an independent consultant be rejected?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you. So it is open for council to form the view that places not be included in the heritage list where an owner objection has been received. The decision as to which properties are included in the heritage list is at the complete discretion of each local government.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. And just before I ask Mr Brogan to ask his third question, I do note that we've gone over the 15 minutes for public question time. I've got the power to unilaterally extend that for a further 15 minutes under the standing orders. I do so. Dr Brogan?
We'll require only a minute, Mr Mayor.
Oh no, but there's people after you as well, so
Yeah, okay.
yes, please proceed.
Optimistically, we will have an outcome in relation to a heritage list for South Perth. My last question is a simple procedural one. There will need clearly to be a predictable process of maintenance and updating for the heritage list once it's created. How does the city see this operating?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you for the question, and unfortunately, it's not a simple answer. So the regulations do not prescribe a statutory timeframe for the review of the heritage list, only that the local government has a heritage list. So if the list is modified, owners are required to be consulted. The local heritage survey is used to inform whether amendments should be made to the future heritage list. The guidelines for local heritage surveys recommend a general review of the local heritage survey take place at intervals consistent with the major review of a local planning strategy or the strategic community plan, or at defined intervals nominated by the local government. The need to amend or prepare a local planning strategy is recommended to occur via a review of the local planning scheme as part of what's known as the report of review. The report of review is required to be carried out no later than 6 months after the requirement to review the local planning scheme or such longer timeframe as determined by the West Australian Planning Commission. The city is required to prepare a consolidation of its local planning scheme or a new local planning scheme in the 5th year after approval was granted for the scheme. Local Planning Scheme number 7 was gazetted on the 27th of March 2024, and as such, that review will not occur until 2029. As such, unless there are ad hoc amendments to the local heritage survey and following council adopting a heritage list, the city does not intend to initiate a review of that future heritage list until at least 2030.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Dr Brogan, for your questions.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'd now like to invite Mr John Bassett of Como, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you and good evening. I'd just like to take a moment to thank the council officers for the extensive research that was conducted in documenting the properties for the Heritage Survey. In the draft stage, some of us in the community considered the rating of some of the properties on the list was too low. And I think Councillor Brenda O'Brandis, who, as I recall, raised, and I think it was in December, the proposal to engage an independent heritage consultant, which Council then did. That review indicated that many properties were indeed underrated, and it also raised the suggestion that the Hobbs Avenue group be recognised in the future as a heritage area, as it is the only cohesive set of properties in the streetscape within South Perth, which is somewhat depressing.
Mr Bassett,
my first question.
Yeah, yes. I've got to be fair to everyone. If you could proceed to question 1, please.
In considering the categories of the properties on the list, as recommended by a qualified heritage consultant, does Council pay any credence to residents seeking to change the category, and I emphasise the category of the properties, that appear to be based more on their self-interest than the broader interests of the community and, more importantly, the advice of an independent heritage consultant?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Inclusion of the Hovia Terrace and Hobbs Avenue group of properties in the draft local heritage survey does not automatically include them in a future heritage list. The local heritage survey is used to inform the future heritage list, but in itself has no statutory weight. Whilst this is a matter for individual elected members, the City has presented a schedule of submissions to inform Council of the views of the submitters as it relates to the local heritage survey.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Your second question, Mr Bassett.
At the Council briefing last week, reference was made to the activation zones within South Perth. Does Council take the view that properties within the designated activation zones may not be afforded heritage protection?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you. So reference was made to activity centres, which are designated as such under State Planning Policy 4.2 activity centres, and are areas which are recommended for more detailed planning via a precinct structure plan. Places on the local heritage survey and future local heritage list can exist within areas subject to a precinct structure plan. However, if the place is on the heritage list, development approval is required prior to any use or works on the land occurring. It is open to Council to determine which places it includes in the future heritage list.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. And your final question, Mr Bassett?
I think Ms Shaw may have partially answered this already, but my understanding is that the local heritage survey may be adopted this evening, and then properties are recommended to the Heritage Council for listing and consequent protection. Will Council simply adopt a listing as recommended by the independent consultant and then engage in further consultation on which properties are recommended for protection? Or is there an intention to deal with the issues at the point of adoption of the survey and then refer the complete set to the Heritage Council?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So, no, that's not correct. So once the local heritage survey is adopted, the city provides a copy to the Heritage Council of Western Australia for their records. Creation of the heritage list is a separate process under the Planning and Development Act 2005 and associated regulations, not the Heritage Act 2018. Should Council adopt the local heritage survey with the recommendations of the independent heritage consultant, the city will then present a further report to Council with all Category 1 and 2 places on the local heritage survey for consideration for the draft heritage list. The city would be required to then undertake consultation on the heritage list with affected property owners and occupiers in accordance with the regulations prior to Council considering adoption of the heritage list.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Mr Bassett, for the questions. Okay, I'll just check with governance to see if there's any questions in the tray. No, there's not? Okay. In that case, I now close public question time at 36 minutes past 6 p.m. That brings us to item 7, which is confirmation of minutes and notes. Item 7.1 is minutes. Item 7.1.1 is the ordinary council meeting held on 27 May 2025. So, councillors, I'm about to look for a mover and a seconder for a motion that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held 27 May 2025 be taken as read and confirmed as a true and correct record. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Brenda Brandis, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose? No? Okay, then I'll declare that carried unanimously. Item 7.2 is notes of briefing. So I'll call for someone to move that council notes that the following council briefings and workshops were held. That's 7.2.1, concept briefings and workshops, and 7.2.2, council agenda briefing, 17 June 2025. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Navard, I think, was first there, seconded by Councillor Coveney. Councillors, does anyone oppose? No? All right, I'll declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 8 is presentations. Item 8.1 is petitions. That's nil for this evening. Item 8.2 is gifts or awards presented to council. That's nil for this evening. And item 8.3 is deputations. And deputations were heard at the council agenda briefing held 17 June 2025. That brings us to item 9, which is the method of dealing with agenda business. And I'll now seek confirmation from the Acting Chief Executive Officer, Mr Gary Adams, that all the report items contained in tonight's agenda were discussed at the June Council agenda briefing, with the exception of the following items. That's item 10.3.6, provision of e-scooter services, item 15.1.1, City of South Perth Fencing Local Law 2024, item 15.1.2, City of South Perth Cats Local Law 2024, and item 15.1.3, appointment of Acting Chief Executive Officer. Mr Adams.
That's correct, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Okay. So with the exception of those items to be withdrawn for discussion, reports will be adopted by exception resolution. And by this, I mean the officer recommendation will be, that was weird, will be adopted as is without discussion or amendment. The following items have been withdrawn for discussion this evening. That's item 10.3.1, entitled Draft Local Heritage Survey Adoption. The reason for that is I've declared a financial and a proximity interest, and Councillor Nick Coveney has an amendment. We've also got item 10.3.6, provision of e-scooter services. The reason for that is it's a new report. We have item 10.4.1, adoption of the annual budget 2025 to 2026 and the long-term financial plan. The reason for that is an absolute majority is required. Item 10.5.2, entitled Corporate Business Plan 2025/26 to 2028/29. The reason for that is an absolute majority is required. And item 10.5.3, Policy Review. And the reason for that is Councillor Bronwyn has an amendment. Councillors, does anyone have any other items that they wish to withdraw this evening? That's a no, okay. In that case, I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following items by exception resolution. Those items are as follows. Item 10.1.1, entitled Large Scale Commercial Event Proposal on Sir James Mitchell Park, Nocturnal Food and Beverage Village in November 2025. Item 10.1.2, entitled RFT 6 of 2025, Operation and Management of a Reuse Shop and Recycling Centre Customer Interface. Item 10.3.2, entitled Amendments to Local Planning Policies. Item 10.3.3, entitled Revocation of Local Planning Policies. Item 10.3.4, entitled Draft Local Planning Policy 7.2, Significant Views, Advertising. Item 10.3.5, Response to Notice of Motion, Community Consultation for Tree Planting/Tree Removals. Item 10.4.2, entitled Listing of Payments, May 2025. Item 10.4.3, entitled Monthly Financial Statements, May 2025. And item 10.5.1, entitled Audit Register Progress Report, Third Quarter Update. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Waugh, thank you. Well, does anyone oppose, councillors? That's a no, okay. In that case, all of those items have just been passed by exception resolution in accordance with clause 5.5 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders Local Law 2007, and the officer's recommendations have been accepted by council. We'll now be moving on to those reports identified to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, the first of which is item 10.3.1, entitled Draft Local Heritage Survey Adoption. Councillors, as you know, I've declared a financial and proximity interest in this item, so I will leave the chamber for the duration of this item. But before I do, I'd like to invite the Deputy Mayor to take my place as presiding member for the duration of this item. And if someone would be kind enough to come and retrieve me after this item has been concluded, I'd be grateful. I'll see you all shortly.
Righto, thank you. So item 10.3.1, Mr Adams, would you care to introduce the item for us, please?
I don't need to. You just need to ask someone to move the officer recommendation.
Sure, okay. Councillors, can I have somebody to move the officer recommendation, please? Councillor Jennifer Navard, and have we got a seconder for the item? Councillor Cridland, thank you. Now, I note that we have an amendment as well. So, Councillor Coveney, do you wish to move your amendment?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Prendeville. Councillor Coveney, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you. So my amendment to the substantive motion is as follows: that Council adopts the draft local heritage survey subject to modifications to the following classifications of significance. The first being place number 34, residence, number 426 Canning Highway, Como, from level 2 to level 3. The second being place number 37, commercial premises, number 91 Coode Street, South Perth, from level 2 to level 3. The third being place number 90, residence, 2 Parker Street, South Perth, level 2 to level 3. And the fourth being place number 91, 579 Queen Street, South Perth, from level 3 to level 4.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillor Prendeville, do you have anything to say to that seconding?
Sorry, no, I haven't actually given my reasons. That was
My
just the
apologies. Councillor Coveney, please state your reasons.
Thank you. Inclusion on the local heritage survey doesn't impact what homeowners can and cannot do with their properties. However, elected members have been advised in previous reports that the city does intend to recommend that those with a classification level 1 or 2 on the local heritage survey be included in the future heritage list. Inclusion on that list does impact what homeowners can and cannot do with their properties. This amended motion seeks that those properties which have been recommended classification level 1 or 2 on the survey, where objections have been received by homeowners, be reclassified as level 3. As it turns out, there's no properties with a classification level 1 which are impacted by this amendment. I do agree with preserving heritage when we're talking about community assets, for example, the police station, the post office and Como Theatre. However, I have a fundamental difficulty when we're talking about privately owned homes. A person's home is often their main asset. It's where they've sunken their life savings. It's where they've invested time, money and energy into maintaining. Character homes are already traditionally significantly more costly to buy and maintain, and I don't wish to make those owners' lives more difficult and costly, nor do I wish to risk being responsible for unilaterally causing a significant decrease in the value of their homes. I ask each councillor to consider whether they would support their own homes being put onto this register by somebody else. If the answer is no, then I'd ask you to reflect on whether you're comfortable doing the same thing to your fellow community members. In my view, private property rights are important because they're a foundation of individual freedom, economic stability and democracy. That concludes my reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillor Prendeville, do you now wish to speak as seconder?
Thank you, Ms Deputy Mayor. I support Councillor Coveney's amendment to the motion this evening. I too understand the desire to preserve what we have and to look after our heritage and preserve the character of our beautiful city, but I will not do this at the expense of our local families. There have been lots of concerns around this topic, around the impact of property owners, and I believe that this amended motion from Councillor Coveney alleviates these concerns. I understand as well the inclusion on the local heritage survey does not restrict our homeowners and what they can do to their property. It is that next step that can have the impacts. I believe, along with many residents that I've heard from recently, and we've all heard from them, that it's important to assist in avoiding any potential restrictions for our residents. If you own your own home and you strongly believe that it should be protected and you have nominated your own home for the local heritage survey and wish for it to receive a high category and be included on the list with firm restrictions so as to protect the future of this, and that's fantastic. Your home, your investment, your choice. We've heard from many City of South Perth ratepayers, some shocked, some saddened, angry and bewildered, and such a thing may occur without their consent and without their permission. The idea that one person can nominate their home without them being aware, and if it makes its way through this process, can possibly hinder their ability to renovate, extend, adjust their home in any way without an application. For me, it is not worth that risk, and simply put, it's not fair for them. You can imagine you buy a beautiful character home in Kensington with your young family, and you and your family grow, becoming embedded in the supportive and beautiful community, and know in your hearts this is where you want to spend your future. You've made lifelong friends, have amazing neighbours and future plans to develop your home to accommodate your growing family. Along with a lot of Perth families, you're navigating the increasing costs of living, housing crisis, and many other issues. You want to stay in Kensington, but your house is small, and so is the suburb. You cannot find another home that will house you and your family. They just aren't available, and selling and buying is an expensive option that you cannot afford to do right now. Next minute you receive this letter, your world turns upside down, and this is a reality for many families this week. And to think that as we, as a council of elected members, have the right to decide on their future is bewildering, to say the least. The home can be someone's biggest investment in their lives. It's not my home. It's not for me to make these decisions that could impact these families simply because I want to preserve character and history. There are many other ways in which we can do this, like Councillor Coveney mentioned, focusing on our beautiful buildings in the city, our theatre, Windsor Hotel, Heritage House, and many more. So simply put, your home, your choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prendeville. Councillor Coveney, did you have a question?
Yes, please, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to confirm that what I'm seeking to do is to adopt my motion over the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. I have that as an amendment to the substantive motion here, so I thought we were debating the amendment. Am I?
That's my understanding.
Yep.
Can I seek clarification from Director Shaw?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So the effect of council potentially moving and adopting the amendment to the substantive motion means that only the places that have been included in the amended substantive motion will be replaced in the existing officer recommendation. So all other places that would otherwise be contained in the officer recommendation would be retained as amended and recommended, with the exception of these properties only.
Is that not what you're intending to do?
I'll sidebar with Director Shaw as the debate goes on. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Councillors, did anybody have any questions in relation to this item? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I've got a few questions just with regard to the reasoning, the justifications for the amendment. So the first question that I have for the administration would be with regard to valid decision making that we should be taking into consideration. So if we consider that private property rights have been used as justification, is that valid decision making for heritage survey?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Apologies, Deputy Mayor. Do you mind repeating the question?
Yes, certainly, Director Shaw. So with regard to the reasons provided for this amendment, I'm considering the questions around valid decision making, so criteria that we should be taking into account when we consider properties for heritage survey and future inventory. So I can see that private property rights have been included as a foundation for individual freedom, economic stability and democracy. So with regard to the private property rights aspect, what is valid with regard to that in context for heritage surveys?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So property values aren't a material planning consideration in the consideration of the creation of the local heritage survey and the future heritage list from a planning perspective. However, the Heritage Act 2018 does enable local governments to consider any other matter beyond what is otherwise contained within the local heritage survey guidelines to identify cultural heritage significance. So on that basis, it's open for elected members to decide that property values are a relevant consideration in determining whether the property is included on the local heritage survey or not.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillor Brenda Brandis, you have one more.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you again, Director Shaw. So with regard to the council making decisions with regard to values of properties taken into consideration, is that fairly standard across other local governments? Is that a criteria that they use for assessing and determining properties that should be considered for a survey or a listing?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's not a consideration in terms of whether a place has cultural heritage significance or not, but it is a consideration that council can use when deciding whether to include a place on the heritage survey or list.
Thank you. Councillor Brandis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Director Shaw. Another justification included was the cost of maintenance. So again, given heritage properties may be more costly in some instances with regard to the materials used and the expertise required, is the cost a valid consideration for heritage properties to be considered as part of a heritage survey?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, it's not a relevant consideration in terms of whether a place has cultural heritage significance or not. However, some local governments recognise that where a place is included on their heritage list, there are those associated costs with maintaining the property. And they do provide grant funding and the like for residents who own properties on a heritage list to undertake works to their property.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Did you have an additional question? Thank you, Councillor Brandis.
Thank you, Director Shaw, and thank you, Deputy Mayor. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. With regard to the heritage survey, again, this motion is also, this amendment to the substandard motion is also on the premise that this takes into consideration properties have been nominated as part of the survey. So at this point in time, should we be giving this as much consideration as opposed to when it actually requires properties to be considered for listing as inventory?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So regardless of what category is allocated as part of the local heritage survey, there's no statutory weight afforded to the survey. So this is just a category, this is just a collection of places that represents places that have or may have cultural heritage significance. However, it is used to inform the future heritage list. And so as I've previously outlined, the city intends to recommend that all category 1s and 2 places on the local heritage survey be put forward for consideration for the future heritage list. So when council is considering the future heritage list, it can still choose to remove those properties at that point in time and not include them on the heritage list. But it would make sense that if something was not to be put forward on the future heritage list, that the category would potentially change at this point in time.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillors, do we have any additional questions this evening? Councillor Coveney.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, I would like to bring an amendment to my amendment, which is to include 2 more properties to that list. And I can read them aloud if that's helpful.
You have to deal with one amendment at a time, sorry. You do another amendment afterwards, but the standing orders require us to deal with one amendment at a time.
Right, thank you. So the first amendment is to include place number 8719 Glyde Street, South Perth, from level 2 to level 3. That's the first amendment.
Sorry, you have to deal with the amendment that's before us now.
Then bring it back. Sorry, I understand. Thank you.
Councillors, did anybody wish to speak for or against this item, or are there any additional questions? Councillor Navard.
Madam Chair, I'd like to speak against it for 3 particular reasons. First of all, I think this is like reactive rule making, and I don't think that's a wise way to go about thinking about something that's going to last till 2029. I also think that it is always wise to keep in place an auditable process of how you undertook the heritage survey. And the moment you start fiddling around with it, that becomes contaminated. And so on the basis of having clear processes, I think it's very important that we don't go tinkering with it at this point. As well, this survey is part of a state process while the heritage listing, whatever that may turn out to be, will be a city-run process with a council decision at the end. And I don't think we should be conflating the two sets of processes. We have a survey, that's one activity, and it's state-related. The other one is part of our own specific council activities, and therefore I think we should think of it and deal with it separately. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Did anybody wish to speak for the item? Oh, Councillor Brenda Browse, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a question. With regard to the properties that have been listed in this amendment, has any qualitative criteria assessment actually been undertaken that would take into consideration the character, the rarity, maybe some of the social, historical, cultural aspects of these properties in proposing to change the categorisations of these properties? Has anything been undertaken at all that might be qualitative and scientific?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. No, the city has not undertaken any further assessment of the places. The city's original recommendation was put forward in the advertised version of the Local Heritage Survey, and the recommendations contained within the officer recommendation in the report includes all of the modifications that have been recommended by the independent heritage consultant.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Did anybody else have any questions in relation to this item? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Director Shaw. So just to clarify, the changing proposed in these categories is not, as far as you're aware, been undertaken by an independent expert?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cridland, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. My question is to Director Shaw, and that is, assuming the amended motion or an amended motion similar to that put forward by Councillor Coveney gets up, would such a motion prevent the city or the council at a later stage from recommending or proposing properties that might be, for example, in category 3, and just using as an example Blue Waters, under Councillor Coveney's amended motion for the heritage list?
Thank you. Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. No, because they are two separate processes. So the city will be recommending categories 1 and 2 be considered for the heritage list, but there is no prescription to council on what properties it includes in the heritage list, only that it undertakes consultation with the owners and occupiers prior to adopting the heritage list. So council could choose, when considering the heritage list, to include all properties categories 1 to 4. It could only include categories 1, it could do 1 to 2, or any other combination.
Thank you. Councillor Cridland.
Sorry, so for example, it could do categories 1 and 2 plus a couple out of category 3.
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any additional questions? No. I have a few questions, and I'd like to ask Director Shaw for clarity, although I know some of these have slightly been answered already through debate and also through some of the question time. My first question is, can you explain to us what is the difference between a local heritage survey and a heritage list?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So the Local Heritage Survey is a collection of places that have or may have cultural heritage significance, and it's used to inform the preparation of the heritage list. So the Local Heritage Survey in itself has no specific planning or legal weight. In contrast to that, the Heritage List is an instrument that's afforded powers under the Planning and Development Act 2005 and therefore carries statutory weight when determining planning outcomes for heritage places.
Thank you, Director Shaw. And an additional question. So do properties then on the local heritage survey, do they have legal protection at all?
Thank you. So no, places on the local heritage survey simply provide the recognition of the importance of the place to the local community. So places that are entered into the local heritage survey do not have legal protection unless they are also contained on the heritage list within a heritage area, or they're separately also contained on the Register of State Heritage Places.
Thank you, Director Shaw. So if we were to include a place as a category 1 or 2 on the survey that's before us, does that mean that it would then automatically be included on the heritage list?
Thank you. No, so council will need to separately consider the heritage list, and as I mentioned to Councillor Cridland, it's open to council to consider which places at that point in time it puts forward for the heritage list. The city would then be required to undertake separate consultation with those owners and occupiers prior to council then further considering the heritage list for final adoption.
Thank you, Director Shaw. So do we have to have a heritage list, or can we just have the local heritage survey?
Thank you. Yes, the Planning and Development Act 2005 requires every local government to have a heritage list. And as I mentioned, council can choose which places it includes on the heritage list. The Heritage Act 2018 requires the local government to have a local heritage survey.
Thank you. So then if a place is placed on the local heritage survey, could the owners theoretically then go and demolish that place?
Yes, if a place is on the local heritage survey and it's not on the heritage list in a heritage area or on the State Register of Places, the owners can demolish the place. If the place is placed on the heritage list, an application for development approval would be required prior to demolition of the place occurring. If that application was then refused, there's an application for review that's available for those owners to the State Administrative Tribunal.
Thank you, Director Shaw. So would including the place on the heritage list impact on the property values? I know that we have heard from people to say that.
Yes. So there are studies that show that there can be positive impacts for having a place heritage listed, but independent property valuations can also state that it has a negative impact on the property values due to the additional controls that would occur as a result of being contained on a heritage list.
Thank you, Director Shaw. So how could somebody who's not the owner of a property nominate, for example, my place, on the local heritage survey?
So the guidelines for local heritage surveys recommend a call for nominations as part of the review process for a local heritage survey, and that provides the ability for community members to identify places that could be considered for inclusion in the local heritage survey. Where an objection is received to that place, the city then had an independent heritage consultant review that place nomination to determine whether the classification of the place was appropriate. So council is not required to include any places on the survey just because they've been nominated by a member of the community. However, it can also choose to include places where the owner has not provided consent or where they have provided consent.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillors, are there any additional questions on this item? Councillor Brenda Radis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just one more question. With regard to the proposal to recategorise the properties at Queen Street from a level 3 to a 4, is there much merit in that, given that it's categorisation for a 3 down to a 4?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you. Yes, I think there is. The independent heritage consultant recommended that they be reduced to a level 4.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillor Brenda Radis, do you have another question? No, okay. Councillors, does anybody wish to speak in favour of this item this evening? Does anybody wish to speak against the item? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm not in favour of this amended motion, primarily because we're actually making amendments without being based on any qualitative assessment. We haven't had an independent assessment review these proposed categories and reduce them to a lower level. If there was a process that was undertaken that had merit, that was qualitative, that could identify aspects of character, rarity, some of the social, historical or cultural aspects to justify the recategorisation of these properties, I'd consider that appropriate. The reasons for this change have largely been based on emotive justifications, including items such as additional costs and private property rights and values. And as we've heard from Director Shaw tonight, they are not the substantive reasons for and justifying recategorisation of a property. This is only the local heritage survey. It is not the inventory list. And again, yes, this survey does talk to the heritage list, the inventory list. At this point in time, it is a separate process that we would need to consider. I'm uncomfortable with carving out a variety of properties all within the Mill Point ward purely to satisfy outcomes that are not based on any merit or any qualitative assessment. The process that was undertaken by the administration was open and transparent, and it did include consultation. And it's the first part of consultation, you know, for this process, and there will be additional consultation as we move forward towards the heritage list. For these reasons, I don't consider the justification to change these categories to be appropriate and not to be based on any merit. And as Councillor Navard has noted, there is no audit trail. There is no way of actually going back to see how a determination was made to move one property from one category level to another category level. We need to be doing this in a methodical way. It needs to be based on evidence. It needs to be undertaken by an independent expert who can actually talk to the categories and support and justify the reason for the changes. For these reasons tonight, I won't be supporting this amended motion. It does not have the integrity that's required of a very important process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Councillors, does anybody wish to speak in favour of the amendment? No? I think I will. I'm going to speak in favour of it tonight because I do think that it presents a measured and principled approach to some concerns that have been raised by property owners. And I know that this is a very difficult task, and as somebody myself who absolutely loves heritage and loves the preservation of heritage buildings, I believe that the amendment strikes a balance between heritage preservation and private property rights. And in that regard, I note that the amendment only proposes to change the classification levels of properties from L2 to L3 or L3 to L4 in cases where objections have been received. So the changes don't remove the properties from the survey, but instead reclassify them in a way that I think respects homeowner concerns. I am aware that inclusion on the survey may not impact on property use, but future inclusion on the heritage list absolutely does. And in this regard, we as elected members have been advised that the City recommend L1 or L2 properties from the survey for inclusion in the statutory heritage list where restrictions do apply. So this amendment protects the homeowners who have lodged their objections. It simply acknowledges their concerns and avoids the escalation to higher classification levels. And importantly, as noted in the motion, no L1 or L2 properties with objections have been impacted by this amendment, meaning that it's a proactive and symbolic gesture as much as a practical one. So I do agree heritage is important, particularly for community assets like the police station or the Como Theatre, assets that have been owned or maintained by the public. But it is, I agree, fundamentally different when we're talking about privately owned homes. A person's home is often their main financial asset. It's where they've poured their time, their money, their energy. They often love them very, very much, and we can't overlook this. So although we know that character homes already carry a higher cost to maintain, to then look to add additional regulation or uncertainty without the owner's support, I think risks additional financial strain, potentially emotional and legal stress, and also potentially introduces market risk, possibly affecting property values in ways that I don't think council has a mandate to do. So in this regard, I do encourage my fellow councillors to ask themselves if they would be comfortable with their own home being added to the register against their own will. And if the answer is no, then I think we ought to extend that same respect and autonomy to others in the community. I don't believe the amendment undermines any of the heritage goals, but rather upholds the right of homeowners to object and be heard, and reinforces the importance of individual freedoms, economic stability and trust in council processes. Thank you. So on that note, I think one more. Sorry?
Would you like me to close?
Yes.
Thank you. As we heard from Director Shaw, homes at level 1 and 2 on the survey will be recommended for the heritage list and those homeowners' rights impacted, whereas homes at level 3 and 4 on the survey won't be recommended for the heritage list. We know which homeowners are against their homes being level 1 and 2 because they've told us the angst this is causing them. Some have gone so far as to go to the expense of getting legal advice. What gives any of us the right to unilaterally put our neighbours' homes on a list if they don't want to be on it? I'd really ask you to put yourselves in their shoes. There's been talk by some councillors about there being no trail. There is a trail. Community consultation went out. It came back, and it's time we listened.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. So I will now put the item to the vote. So we're voting on the amendment to the substantive motion. Thank you. All of the votes are in. And we have, the amendment has passed. We have those in favour were Councillor Nick Coveney, Councillor Gren Cridland, Councillor Blake de Souza and Councillor Hayley Prenderville and Councillor Bronwyn Waugh. Those against were Councillor Brenda Brandis and Councillor Jennifer Navard. Councillor Coveney, would you like to move your additional amendment?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Waugh. I'd just like to add 2 properties to be reclassified. The first is place number 87, 19 Glyde Street, South Perth, from level 2 to level 3, and place number 82, residences, Hovia Terrace, Kensington, level 2 to level 3. And the reasons are the same as those before, which is that we've received objections from the homeowners, so I don't need to go into any further detail. My reasons are the same as when I brought the other motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Do we have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Prenderville. I don't think we need to speak to this one again. I will put that straight to the vote if that's okay. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would like to talk to this item. Again, I will not be supporting this amendment for the same reasons. We again are making a decision to recategorise, which is not being based on any merit. It's not been based on any independent process that's considered the character of the properties or collective character of the properties, the social, historical, or even cultural aspects. Again, consultation has been undertaken. I understand the frustration with some of the community members that maybe not enough consultation has been undertaken, but we've got a process that we did undertake consultation. And if you consider this has been a process that's been ongoing for nearly the good part of a year, so there's been sufficient time to be made aware of the local heritage survey. Again, I expect the same justification would be based on emotive reasons as opposed to be based on qualitative and merit-based decision making, and again without the use of an independent expert. So I won't be supporting this motion this evening, this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda
Can I
Brandis.
just interrupt for a minute? Can we just make sure we get the amendment right with the government staff? So I think we just need to make sure it's right on the screen. It needs to have the change of classification in there, doesn't it? Yep.
Councillor Coveney, can you just confirm that on the screen is correct?
I have terrible vision. So if it says 19 Glyde Street and the Hobia Terrace properties, then that's fine. Oh, most excellent. Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, did anybody wish to speak for this amendment? No? Did any? Oh, Councillor Cridland.
I'm going to speak for this amendment, but not for any of the reasons that have been given, I think, so far. What we're talking about is the Heritage Survey, which, on one view, actually has absolutely no impact at all on anyone. But it does impact people because they understand that we are likely to recommend the properties in categories 1 and 2 to go on the heritage list, which does then have an impact on people. And that's what people are concerned about, as well as people who don't understand the ephemeral nature of a heritage survey and how that it doesn't really have any actual impacts on their rights. But people are concerned about that, and that's fair enough. As people have said, their home is often their biggest investment, and people get worried about people impacting upon it. But as Director Shaw has pointed out in response to a question I asked, whether or not they're on this heritage survey as category 1, 2, 3 or 4 doesn't mean that they won't necessarily end up on the heritage list that impacts on them in any case. And clearly there will have to be work done when we go from the heritage survey to what's recommended to go on the heritage list. And that is the time when we will have more expert opinions and hopefully that will give some succour to Councillor Brenda Abrandis, because we certainly aren't experts, but in the end we are the decision makers. We are the elected decision makers for this fine city, and we have to take everything into account, including expert reports, our personal knowledge and background, as well as comments we have from city residents. And there are residents who think that it is a wonderful thing to have many houses on the Heritage Survey, so that we recognise and hopefully protect in the future our heritage. And there are other people who are really worried about the impacts on them. And one of the reasons, well, the main reason, the predominant reason I'm supporting this amendment and the previous one is I am concerned with our consultation, given that I've been contacted by people who said that they found out that their residences had been nominated and put in a certain category, and they weren't given the opportunity to even respond to that because the notification of it came after the close of submissions. That for me is a significant concern, and that is why I'm not supporting it. I think heritage protection is very important, in particular in this area as we go through a lot of changes, as we get increased densification, as the government pushes on us. So we need to protect our heritage. The question was asked by Councillor Coveney, how would I feel, or other councillors feel, if my property was placed on the list? Well, I'm not sure anyone would think it's particularly nice, but I wouldn't be bothered because I've been the owner of a heritage property in Victoria and owner of a heritage property in Queensland, and I think it's important to have those listings because both of those properties added to the amenity of the area. The area was so much nicer because those properties were retained. I'm generally a supporter of keeping, style, culture, architecture that is part of our history and heritage. So that it doesn't actually concern me if someone thought that my property had to go on that list. Yes, it does impact on private property rights, but so do many other things. So do, the sort of things I can do on my property. But I do think people need to have a fair opportunity to actually comment before it goes on this list or survey, albeit a survey that doesn't really actually in any substantive way impact on their rights. And, for example, as I understand the amendment, we will be moving Blue Waters from, everyone knows Blue Waters, it's one of the most fantastic examples of Art Deco in our city, and probably Perth, I'd say. And we're moving that from category 2 to 3. I think that's a property which must go on the heritage list.
Excuse me, Councillor Cridland, you've reached your time limit. Do you wish to finish up or shall I move?
I've got about 10 seconds. So irrespective of whether that is category 2 or 3, from my perspective, that is the sort of property that has to go on the heritage list. And that's something we'll have to deal with down the track. But that's why I'm supporting this amendment, although perhaps for different reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, did you have a question? Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. So just with regard to the process, we've obviously heard a few nominated properties that the ratepayers had indicated that they probably didn't have a fair process with regard to providing response. At last week's agenda briefing, I understood that the process followed was pretty much compliant with our procedures. Would I be able to get some feedback as to whether the administration feel that the due process was actually undertaken as prescribed?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, it was. However, I can understand the concerns from the community with the process as recommended by the Local Heritage Survey guidelines. So in effect, there's an initial call for nominations from the community where any member of the community can nominate any property for consideration in the Local Heritage Survey. After the survey is then adopted for advertising by council, it goes out for formal advertising. And at that point in time, not only are the owners and occupiers notified of the potential category on the survey, but members of the community can also recommend modifications to those place categories as advertised. So following closure of the formal submission period, where we'd received submissions that recommended that changes be made to the categories that were originally advertised, that's where we engaged the independent heritage consultant to provide, information as to whether or not the category should be retained as originally advertised or whether a modification should be made. In the instances where a modification was recommended by the heritage consultant, we then wrote to the landowners advising that there would be a change to the category and to let them know that that was occurring prior to council considering the heritage survey for final adoption. So yeah, I can understand the confusion, one in that members of the community can nominate other people's places, both ahead of advertising and during the course of advertising of the survey, and in the case where an independent heritage consultant can recommend a modification after the formal statutory advertising process is closed. So whilst I don't believe there was any there was nothing wrong formally with the process that was undertaken. It's in accordance with the heritage guidelines. It's certainly a confusing process for the community.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillor Brenda Brandis, another question.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. One final question. If this amendment proceeds and the previous amendment was successful, we've obviously recategorised quite a few properties that were proposed for, some of them for Category 2. Does the administration have any indication as to how many properties we'll have in this survey that will remain in Category 2 or better following the previous amendment and this amendment?
Thank you, Director Shaw. Is that
thank you, Deputy Mayor. It would take me a bit to go through each of the places because the amendment that was originally put forward by Councillor Coveney only included places where owners had objected to the property. So it doesn't necessarily include all Category 2 places because they weren't included if the owner did not object.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillors, does anybody wish to speak for or against who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Navard.
Just one final word regarding the considerations. Sadly, I'm aware that there's been no thought about the actual increase in value of properties that can sit inside areas of special consideration or character, or dwellings that have been put on a list and become highly valued. And I can certainly attest to that from my own experience with a house that had been heritage listed. It was strongly promoted as that when the house was sold, and many people came to look at it on those grounds. And I can also say that I know that's a recent example in Claremont too, where somebody had a similar kind of experience to our own. And so it does make me quite sad and concerned that we're hearing all about property losses and we haven't given any consideration to potential for taking areas, valuing particular areas and particular dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Does anybody else wish to speak to the item who hasn't already spoken? No? Okay, I shall put this amendment to the vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Coveney, would you like to wrap up?
No.
Okay, I will now put the amendment to the vote. Okay, thank you. And that one has also passed. Those in favour, Councillor Nick Coveney, Councillor Gren Cridland, Councillor Blake D'Souza, Councillor Hayley Prenderville and Councillor Waugh, myself. And those against is Councillor Brenda Brandis and Councillor Navard. Thank you. And now we move to the substantive motion as amended. So our mover of this one, I believe, was Councillor Navard, and our seconder was Councillor Cridland.
Sorry, no.
The officer's
Has that been
recommendation.
corrected? It was the original motion, yeah,
That's correct. So
not
that's
the amended motion. I didn't, yeah.
You move the officer recommendation, which has now had amendments to it, and so once the amendments are made, it goes to an amended substantive motion, and you were the original mover. So yourself and Councillor Cridland.
Councillor Navard. As the mover of the motion, would you like to speak to it?
No, thank you.
And Councillor Cridland, as the seconder, would you like to speak to it?
Very briefly. Our heritage is really important. Like the trees in our streets, it's what makes this place a lovely place to live in. And we do need to keep our heritage, our history, our character. And I've heard what the mover said during debate on the amendments. I think protection of these things doesn't reduce the value of your properties. It actually increases the value emotionally, as far as the value of living there, as well as, you know, also the filthy lucre that you might get when you sell your property if you live in a character area. So I'm not sure those are all big concerns, but we do need to take the community along with us. And one of my concerns was that the process that we used allowed not only owners at the end to have a say, but also members of the community. So in that final say, an owner might go, well, that's okay, I can live, for example, with category 3 at this stage, and then to find out as a result of someone that they don't know who suggests that the property should be upgraded to category 3, they find out that their property has instead turned out category 2. So they then don't get an opportunity to have a say on that because it's all closed. I just think we need to have a better process, and perhaps we can look at that when it comes to the actual heritage listing, and maybe that means we won't be entirely consistent with our 1s, 2s, 3s and 4s, but I do know that properties of really great value to the city and to the wider metropolitan area, like, for example, Blue Waters, do need to be on that list, whether they're owned by someone as private property or whether it's public property. But that's just my view. And I think we should, even if you don't like the amendments, we should support this survey because we need to have something done. And it's work in progress. We can make it better. We've all got different views on that, but we need to make sure the owners also feel taken along on this journey with us.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Councillors, does anybody wish to speak against the item or for the item? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will be speaking for the item. This is a very important item before us tonight. It's probably a matter that's been long overdue for quite some time and hasn't been given enough time or attention. I am delighted that we engage an independent expert to undertake a review, and it was a review based on merit that took into consideration things such as character, rarity, social, heritage and cultural aspects. So it was a due process was undertaken, and for the properties that remain without amendment, those properties have undertaken a process which is actually which has been verified. It is very important for us to continue considering heritage properties. Too many good properties have been lost, and some of them are quite significant, quite unique. Having a very good review of the report before us tonight, there are a lot of properties that unfortunately have not been retained and would have added a lot of additional value to the community as a character precinct even. So tonight I will be supporting this motion. It is very important. We do need to continue working closely with the property owners and also the broader community, because people have obviously made investment decisions to move here, and part of that might have very well been on the character of what is South Perth, and it is very much unlike a lot of other local governments within our vicinity. So we need a long-term vision. It needs to be meaningful, and it needs to take into consideration heritage and conservation. And for that reason tonight, I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brandis. Does anybody else wish to speak for or against the item? No? Councillor Navarre, do you wish to close? Thank you. Okay, councillors, I'm going to put the motion as amended to the vote. We have one more person. Okay, and the motion has passed. Though all those in favour were Councillor Brenda Brandis, Councillor Nick Coveney, Councillor Glenn Cridland, Councillor Blake D'Souza, Councillor Hayley Prenderville and myself, Bronwyn Waugh, and those against were Councillor Navard. Thank you. Now if somebody could please collect the Mayor.
All right, thank you all. I'm going to assume that that item 10.3.1 has been dealt with now. We're moving on to item 10.3.6, which is entitled Provision of e-Scooter Services. We have an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received any amended motions or alternative motions. Would anyone like to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Coveney, anyone to second? Councillor D'Souza? Councillors, does anyone oppose this item? No. Then I'll declare it carried unanimously. Moving on to item 10.4.1, which is entitled Adoption of the Annual Budget 2025/26 and the Long-Term Financial Plan. Councillors, an absolute majority is required for this item. Once again, we've got an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received any amended motions or alternative motions. I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. Would someone like to second? Councillor Coveney, I think, was first there. Okay. All right. So, councillors, I'm pleased to move this budget. Let's start with the aspect of local government budgets that tends, rightly or wrongly, to attract the most attention, which is the council rates movement. This budget sees a rates increase of 2.8%, which once again is consistent with the Perth CPI figure for the preceding March. This is the 7th consecutive year where the budget has kept rate rises, I should say, at or below the Perth CPI figure without impacting significantly on the level of service being provided to ratepayers. Starting with the 2019-2020 financial year, Council has now adopted budgets with rate rises totalling 16.7% over a 7-year period, which is well below the Perth March to March CPI increases of 23.8% over the same period. That's a 7% reduction in real terms. So we're looking after our ratepayers. That's good. But lower rates alone don't make a good economic manager. Councillors, we have approximately $800 million in non-current public assets, such as property, plant, equipment and infrastructure that we're responsible for. Think roads, think parks, think recreation facilities, think playgrounds, think libraries, think drainage infrastructure, all of the local government things that people generally take for granted most of the time, but which we tend to notice very quickly when they're not looked after properly. Almost all of these assets have a limited life and will inevitably require replacement or renewal at some stage. And we can't properly replace or renew those public assets unless we make proper financial provision for the future replacement and renewal of those public assets. And as the officer report says, that's why we need to be generating operating surpluses. Little history lesson as to where we've been and where we've gotten to in a relatively short period of time. When I became mayor in October 2019, the city had been reporting a series of operating losses. By way of example, the city reported an operating loss of $3.2 million in the 2019/20 financial year. The city had reported an operating loss of $3 million the year before that, and an operating loss of $3.4 million the year before that. Councillors, I'm of the view that that was unsustainable. Since that time, though, we've turned those figures around. We've turned those consecutive operating losses of $3 million into operating surpluses of $3.5 million in the 2022/23 financial year, and then $4.4 million in the 2023/24 financial year. The financial report at item 10.4.3 suggests that we're on track for a healthy operating surplus for the current financial year, that's 2024/25. True, this budget is forecasting a break-even year for 2025/26, but we are now in a position where we can sustain a one-off break-even year. And that's why the updated long-term financial plan before us is so important, because we must remember that each individual budget is not prepared in isolation, but instead each budget forms part of a long-term financial plan. So that's good news as well, but I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that the city has simultaneously been spending more on the renewal and repair of public assets than ever before. To illustrate this, once again, let's use the base year of when I became mayor, that was the 2019-2020 financial year. The city spent $12.5 million on capital works, and 86% of that $2.5 million was focused on the renewal and replacement of public assets. As some of you might be aware, over the last few years, the city has been significantly increasing the amount that we spend on capital works while maintaining a renewal and replacement focus of over 80% of those capital works budgets. Got a little bit more time and then I'm going to have to interrupt myself. As you would have seen from the officer report, the 2025/26 budget includes a very significant capital works plan with expenditure of $31.6 million, which represents an increase of more than 250% compared to what we spent in the 2019/2020 financial year. That's 5 minutes, so I've got to interrupt myself. Would someone be kind enough to move a motion that I be granted a further 5 minutes? Councillor Brenda Brandis, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Waugh, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors, for the indulgence. I'll try not to use the full 5 minutes. So I think this budget before us right now features the largest capital works plan the city has ever had. And of this amount, 83% is focused on renewal and replacement of public assets and infrastructure, although there's some new assets, some new goodies planned as well. So to sum up, we've come back from an extended period of operating losses to realise operating surpluses in the 2022/23 and 2023/24 fiscal years. We're on track to report another operating surplus in this financial year. These improved operating results, together with increased capital expenditure with a very strong focus on renewal, have all been achieved while simultaneously increasing our reserve funds, which are mainly earmarked for asset renewal. Specifically, our reserves increased from $35.6 million in 2019/20 to $46.7 million in 2023/24, and it's budgeted to be approximately $50.5 million in 2025/26. And all of that, councillors, has been achieved without a single rates movement in excess of Perth CPI for 7 years now. All in all, councillors, that's a pretty great turnaround in a relatively short period of time. And I would very much like to thank former CEO Mike Bradford, Acting CEO Gary Adams, Finance Manager Aubrey Leacock, as well as the wider city administration for their efforts in making council's vision of a financially sustainable local government a reality. This is the kind of discipline and financial management that this city will need going forwards to properly secure and safeguard the amenity that this city provides for so many people. We're not done yet. We've still got more to do. Yes, this budget forecasts a 4th consecutive operating surplus, but it is admittedly a very slim one. And while it is true that we've reported 3 consecutive years of operating surpluses, when we include this financial year, the city reported 11 operating deficits during the 12 fiscal years between 1 July 2010 and 30 June 2022. So we're not out of the woods yet, especially when we consider the wider economic environment alluded to in the officer report. So, good progress, still need to maintain discipline, still need to stick to the plan that's been developed over several years now, and as a council, we really do need to stay focused on delivering the best possible results for the people that we have been elected to serve. But if we can do that, we'll be going a long way towards ensuring that our city is one of the best places in Australia to live, work and play. And that's a pretty good goal. Councillors, I commend this budget and the long-term financial plan to you. Who was seconder? Was it Councillor Coveney? Councillor Coveney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I could point out what's happened since I became ward councillor, but this budget really isn't about individual performances, it's a team effort. We've had 3 budget workshops run very effectively by the administration. We've had Councillor Waugh's advocacy for Christmas lights, Councillor Prendeville's advocacy for the Maudsley Street upgrades and wall art, and Councillor De Souza's advocacy for the Carrara upgrade, to name but a few. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all, to acknowledge all councillors and the administration. I am very privileged to work with such a wonderful group of people, and I commend this budget to you.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak against the officer recommendation? No? Does anyone else want to speak in favour? Nope. There's no debate. There's no need for me to wind up. I'll simply put the officer recommendation to the vote. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. Okay, moving on to the next item to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, which is item 10.5.2, Corporate Business Plan, 2025/26 to 2028/29. So once again, councillors, there's an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received any amended motions or alternative motions. Would anyone like to move the officer recommendation? I guess I will. Anyone like to second? Councillor Navard, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? Nope. Okay, I'll declare it carried unanimously then. Thank you. We move on to item 10.5.3, which is entitled Policy Review. I am aware that Councillor Waugh has got an amendment to the substantive here. Councillor Waugh, did you just want to lead off with the amendment?
Happy to do so. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. If you can read out the amendment and perhaps let us know how it differs from the officer recommendation, and then we'll see about a seconder.
Thank you. So the amendment is that Council adopts the following revised policies with the amendments shown in Attachment A, P625 Equal Opportunity, P665 Use of Council Facilities and Mayoral Regalia, P667 Elected Member Entitlements, P674 Management of Corporate Records, and P702 Council Caretaker Policy, and revokes the following policy shown in Attachment B, P403 Charity Clothing Bins on City Managed Land. And the one differing point from what the officer recommendation is point number 3, which is refers policy P624 Media Communications to a workshop to allow further collaboration with elected members to improve inclusivity and clarity regarding authorised spokespersons. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Would anyone like to second the Councillor Coveney? Councillor Waugh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be fairly brief. Media communications play a very critical role in how we present ourselves to our community and also how we protect and promote the city's reputation. So I think it's important that the policy reflects not just the technical requirements, but also the lived experience and the expectations of all of us councillors. So in the course of reviewing the policy, it became clear to me, and I believe to others as well, that there are some differing views across the chamber about the role of authorised spokespersons, the inclusivity of council-wide messaging, and how we best reflect the unity of council in our overall media engagement. So these are significant matters that warrant a collective discussion in an open and collaborative setting. So by referring this matter to a workshop, I'm hoping that we can all work together as a council to shape a shared understanding of all of our roles in communication, so that we can ensure that all of our voices are heard and we can arrive at a final version of the policy that better reflects the values of transparency, collaboration and unity, which I think are essential for public confidence. So I bring the deferral motion as a practical and constructive step towards a more inclusive and a well-informed outcome, and I very much thank the administration for their willingness to facilitate this process. And if the deferral is passed this evening, I look forward to engaging with all of my fellow councillors at the upcoming workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillor Coveney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Really briefly, look, I think we have the most wonderful council and administration, and often I don't think their effort goes noticed as much as it should. So to the extent we can promote our wonderful staff and council, I think that's a good thing. So I welcome this workshop.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillors, does anyone wish to speak against the motion? Does anyone else wish to speak in favour? Nope. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, question or wanting to speak?
A couple of questions, Mr Mayor.
Fire away.
Thank you. With regard to this media communications policy, could I just have an indication when we last did a major overhaul? I can see that we've obviously got amendments that occurred in 2019, and then I'm guessing maybe cosmetic amendments last year. But do we know when we undertook a major revamp of this particular policy?
Ms Fry, should I send that your way? Or Ms Catalini? Ms Catalini.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, it is as noted at the bottom of those. So any minor amendments don't come to council. They do go to the committee to review. So it would be as noted down there, which was the 2019 from my awareness. They all come through as all the policies, but in terms of the major review, I think that would be the last major. Any minor amendments, as you know, that don't have a big influence on the policy, are done through the minor reviews.
Thank you very much, Ms. Catalani. Just a final question. So the deferral of this item and taking it to a workshop, is there any indication as to what may be deficient or what we may need to consider for inclusion? Just wonder if there's any indication.
Mr Adams?
I think there are a range of things that Councillor Waugh put forward to us for consideration, and rather than trying to deal with them on the fly in the chamber, we thought it would be better, in consultation with Councillor Waugh, that we do it this way, where it can be discussed at length, and the particular issues that are relevant to individual councillors can be raised in that forum, and administration can then provide a considered review, and if we need to take it away and get some further information prior to bringing the policy back to council, we can do it that way. So it's just really about having a more considered approach than trying to discuss things that some councillors may have already been aware of and others may not have thought about yet in this forum. So it's better to do it the way that Councillor Waugh is proposing.
Thank you, Acting CEO Adams.
Any further questions, folks? No. Councillor Waugh, I don't think there's been any debate, so no need to wind up. I'll simply put the motion to the vote. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Okay, that brings us to item 11, which is applications for a leave of absence. I'm going to be putting up my hand for a leave of absence for the period of Wednesday the 27th of August 2025 to Wednesday the 10th of September 2025 inclusive. Does anyone else have any leave of absence applications that they'd like to make? Councillor Waugh?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I please request the 7th of July to the 23rd of July inclusive, as well as the 6th to
Sorry, the 7th of July through to
23rd of July,
23rd of July.
the 6th to the 14th of October,
6th to the 14th of October.
and the 10th to the 24th of November.
10th to the 24th of November.
Thank you.
All right, I'll just read that back to make sure I've got that correct. That's the 7th of July through to the 23rd of July inclusive, the 6th of October through to the 14th of October inclusive, and the 10th of November through to the 24th of November inclusive. All right, Councillor Prendeville, did I see your hand go up there?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Please, may I have Thursday the 10th of July 2025 until, not August, Monday the 21st of July, inclusive.
All right, so that's the 10th of July through to the 21st of July inclusive. Anyone else, folks? Councillor Cridland?
May I please have 15th of July to the 17th of August inclusive, please?
15th of July through to the 17th of August inclusive. All right. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. All right. So I'm about to call for someone to move that the following leave of absence applications received from myself for the period of 27 August 2025 to 10 September 2025 inclusive, from Councillor Bronwyn Waugh for the periods of 7 July 2025 to 23 July 2025 and 6th of October 2025 to 14th of October 2025 inclusive, and 10th of November 2025 to 24th November 2025 inclusive, from Councillor Hayley Prendeville for the period of 10 July 2025 to 21 July 2025, and from Councillor Glenn Cridland for the periods of 15 July 2025 to 17 August 2025 be granted. Did I get that right, everyone? Yes? Okay. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Brenda Brandis. Councillors, does anyone oppose? Nope, then I'll declare that carried unanimously then. That brings us to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. That's nil for this evening. Item 13 is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice. That's nil. Item 13.2 is questions from members. Are there any questions from members for the City Administration this evening? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have one question, and it is, has the City given consideration to how artificial intelligence could and should be used in the City of South Perth workplace and in work processes within the city?
Mr Adams, should I send that in your direction?
Yes, we've got a number of people investigating different ways of utilising AI in the way that we conduct business in the city. There's a number of forums that have been attended by staff from the city, and there's been some work done by Walga that has looked at how AI can be used. There are some projects going on now. One in particular is to do with how we handle requests from the public and how they come in through emails and how they can be automatically put into our request system with using AI. So that's one example, but there are a lot of other examples. But I guess, as with anything, the technology is always changing and the uses of that technology is always changing. So we do have people that are constantly looking at how we can utilise AI within the city. So yes, it is, and it is a very real thing, and it is ever changing. So there will be a number of things that the city uses AI for, and there will be a number of things that we don't as well. So.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Credland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I heard Rita Safiotti make an announcement over the weekend just past in relation to some 300 million or so to be allocated for sporting facilities, court resurfaces, etc. I heard her say some lighting. I don't know whether that was a re-announcement of something that had previously been announced during the election, but my question is, does that announced funding provide any opportunities for the city in respect of funds for providing us with some much needed sporting facilities such as indoor sports courts?
Who should I send that to, folks? Mr Adams?
So as yet, we haven't been made aware of any additional funding coming our way for sports courts or for other sporting facilities other than what was announced as election promises already, and we are aware that the election commitments were included in the budget. So there was the $2 million for the rugby club. Other than that, in terms of sports courts, we're still awaiting the outcome of the state commissioned report to determine the appropriate location for sports courts, indoor sports courts. You know, once we get some indication of where that location is, then we'll be able to let council know. And then if it is within the City of South Perth, we'll be advocating, I guess, for funding for that.
Do we have any information as to when the government may have worked out the location?
No.
Different topic. About 4 years ago, the council passed a motion in relation to Coma Reserve and amalgamating the lots there with a view to those lots being reserved for future recreational use to ensure that they were there forever for the Croquet Club and the people of Como. Is it possible for the council to get a report as to what's happened in respect of that motion?
I'm vaguely aware of such a motion being passed. It was before I joined the city. But I'm not sure exactly what happened in terms of the progress of that. So we can find out and get back to you.
I'm not asking for it tonight, but yeah. Last question follows on from, I think, a question I asked at the briefing last week, and that was the question I asked last week related to changes to fees for leases and licences, and my recollection is that the answer was that the city's going through a review of what it charges or is considering charging clubs, and it might have been in relation to occupation of places. Does the city have any estimate of how much extra, if any, it may be going to ask sporting clubs and not-for-profits that occupy, or community groups that occupy city facilities to keep operating out of there?
Not yet, and we're looking at a range of different options that will be put to council via a workshop. No, and it would only, what they're looking at is the leased premises, and as I stated, it would only come into effect as those leases become due. So there'd be a lot of leases that are long-term leases where it would have no impact until those leases were up for renewal. I think one thing that you may be aware of and you may have been contacted about by clubs is we're also looking at how we charge the utilities and the outgoings for the premises, because there are there have been some instances where some clubs haven't been charged the amounts that they should have been, and so we'll work with those clubs to get back onto the arrangements that they should have been on with regard to those outgoings and utilities.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Any further questions for the administration, councillors? Councillor Navard.
I seek your indulgence on this, given that I said I only had one question. My question relates to the sale of a house in the area that I think might be the main road reserve of Canning Highway. It's one of the derelict houses, and there could be more than one for sale, and I just wondered if the city knew anything about that.
Ms Shaw, should I send that in your direction?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't know the specific property you're referring to, but the majority of properties along that section of Canning Highway, I think you're referring to where the one sold, are either owned by the West Australian Planning Commission or by Main Roads. So we wouldn't be notified when they've sold the property.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Any further questions, councillors? No? Okay. In that case, we move on to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. That's nil. Item 15 is meeting closed to the public. So, folks, hate to do it, but we're about to go into closed session. Thank you so much for your attendance and participation. And that goes for everyone who's watching and listening on YouTube as well. Thank you very much. You're welcome to stick around, but after we come back from closed session, we're literally going to close the meeting, so you won't be missing anything exciting. So I'm about to call for some Thank you so much. All right, we're back online? Okay, so for the purposes of the minutes, we've just come out of closed session. Items 15.1.1, City of South Perth Fencing Local Law 2024 was carried unanimously. Item 15.1.2, City of South Perth Cats Local Law 2024 was carried unanimously. And item 15.1.3, Appointment of Acting Chief Executive Officer, was carried unanimously. That brings us to item 16, which is closure. Oh, right, okay. Yes, I'm being naughty. I'm not reading out. Gee whiz, they're a bit long. Do I read them out in their entirety? Okay, all right. Well, bear with me, folks. I've got to read out the entirety of the motion that's been carried in each case. So, item 15.1.1, City of South Perth Fencing Local Law 2024. The motion was as follows: that Council resolve to undertake to the Joint Standing Committee on Delegated Legislation that the Council will, paragraph 1, within 1 year amend the local law as follows. Subparagraph A, in clause 2.11, subclause 2, subclause A, and schedule 1, item 9, replace, open quote, AS/NZ S3016:1994, close quote, with open quote, AS/NZS 3016:2022, close quote. Subclause B, in Schedule 1, Item 11, delete the reference to open quote, open bracket 4, close bracket, stop, close quote. Subparagraph C, in Schedule 1, Item 14, replace the clause reference with open quote 2.13, subclause 1, subclause C, subclause Roman numeral 1, or subclause Roman numeral 2, close quote. And paragraph D, make all consequential amendments arising from the above amendments. Paragraph 2, not enforce the local law to the contrary before it is amended in accordance with undertaking 1. Paragraph 3, ensure that a copy of these undertakings accompanies the local law wherever it is made publicly available by the city, whether in hard copy or electronic form. Paragraph 4, advertise on its website how the public can access, free of charge, Australian/New Zealand standards adopted by this local law. And paragraph 5, authorises the advertisement of the Fencing Amendment Local Law 2025 in accordance with section 3.12 of the Local Government Act 1995. That was item 15.1.1, which was carried unanimously. I'm now going to read out item 15.1.2, City of South Perth Cats Local Law 2024. The officer recommendation and motion was as follows: that Council resolves to undertake to the Joint Standing Committee on Delegated Legislation that the Council will, paragraph 1, within 6 years amend the local law as follows. Subparagraph A, in the clause 1.5 definition of open quote, prescribed premises, close quote, replace open quote, CAT Regulations 2012, close quote, with open quote, CAT Uniform Local Provisions Regulations 2013, close quote. Subparagraph B, in clause 2.6, subclause 1, subclause A, the two prescribed conditions should be split into subclauses 1A and 1B respectively. The remaining subclauses should then be re-alphabetised to 1C and 1D. Subparagraph C, in clause 3.14, subclause 1, subclause D, subclause Roman numeral 1, insert the words open quote, either the transferee or, close quote, after the phrase open quote, written evidence that, close quote. Subparagraph D, in Schedule 1, in the item relating to the Gentili boat foreshore to Mount Henry foreshore, replace the phrase open quote, Gentili boat foreshore, close quote, with the phrase open quote, Gentili boat ramp foreshore, close quote. And subparagraph E, make all consequential amendments arising from the above amendments. Paragraph 2, not to enforce the local law to the contrary before it is amended in accordance with Undertaking 1. Paragraph 3, ensure that a copy of these undertakings accompanies the local law wherever it is made publicly available by the city, whether in hard copy or electronic form. And paragraph 4, authorises the advertisement of the CATS Amendment Local Law 2025 in accordance with section 3.12 of the Local Government Act 1995. Okay, that was item 15.1.2, which was carried unanimously. Now we're moving on to item 15.1.3, entitled Appointment of Acting Chief Executive Officer. The officer recommendation and motion was as follows: that Council, paragraph 1, appoint Mr William Matthew Scott as temporary acting Chief Executive Officer from Tuesday 1 July 2025 until such time as a new Chief Executive Officer is appointed and commences with the City of South Perth. And paragraph 2 was approves the total reward package and letter of engagement as contained within confidential attachment B on a pro rata basis for the temporary acting Chief Executive Officer for the period Tuesday 1 July 2025 until such time as a new Chief Executive Officer is appointed and commences with the City of South Perth. And that was item 15.1.3, which was carried unanimously by Council. Okay, that brings us to item 16, which is closure. Before I close tonight's meeting, I would like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation. I declare this meeting closed at 8:23 p.m. Thank you all and good night.